Welcome to today's deep dive. We're unpacking a stack of fresh reports today regarding just an absolute bombshell announcement in the AI world.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah, and this just dropped 2 days ago on May 6, 2026.
Right.
So your mission today as a listener is to understand what happens when two totally opposite philosophies collide. Imagine launching an AI supercomputer that requires as much raw power as the entire city of Seattle right into orbit.
Just a casual undertaking.
Exactly. We're talking about billions of dollars of high-end GPUs floating in the vacuum of space. No local power grid, no terrestrial cooling towers, just this massive multi-gigawatt cluster of artificial intelligence circling the planet.
And the craziest part isn't even the tech.
Right. The two fiercest ideological rivals in the technology sector just announced they are teaming up to actually do this.
Yeah, it is probably the single most counterintuitive partnership in the history of the AI industry. I mean, you have Elon Musk, who is driving SpaceX and his AI venture, xAI. And he is aligning directly with Anthropic, the creators of the Claude models.
Which is just wild for anyone who follows this space. I mean, just a few months ago, Musk was openly calling Anthropic misanthropic.
He threw around the word evil, too.
Yeah, literally called their approach to AI development evil. Because Anthropic's entire identity is built around this idea of constitutional AI.
Right, safety first.
Exactly. They train their models with baked-in rule book of principles, so the AI, polices its own behavior before it ever even interacts with you. It's a very cautious, heavily scrutinized method.
And Musk's philosophy has always been the complete opposite.
Open throttle.
Yeah, maximalist, accelerating toward multi-planetary future without really putting on the brakes. So to see them team up is just fascinating.
So what changed? Why the sudden truce?
Well, the catalyst for this whole 180-degree shift came down to a recent closed-door meeting between Musk and the Anthropic leadership.
Oh, wow. To be a fly on that wall.
Right. And Musk actually came out of that room and publicly stated that his evil detector wasn't triggered.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, he ultimately praised their baseline commitment to humanity. But when you look at the architecture of the deal they just struck, the ideological truce is really just a byproduct.
It's just a convenience.
Precisely. The driving force here is purely pragmatism. In the modern AI arms race, the sheer thirst for computing power just overrides everything. Every prior philosophical disagreement goes out the window.
Which brings us to the immediate, tangible reality of what they're actually sharing right now on Earth. This deal starts with a facility known as Colossus One, which is down in Memphis, Tennessee.
Right, the Memphis behemoth.
Yeah. We are talking about a physical footprint housing over 220,000 NVIDIA GPUs.
It's massive.
It's a dense mix of H100s, H200s, and the newer GB200 architectures.
And the physical infrastructure required to operate a cluster of that density is, well, it's difficult to overstate. I mean, Colossus One draws more than 300 megawatts of power.
Wait, 300 megawatts?
Yeah. When a single facility pulls 300 megawatts, it essentially operates as its own municipality.
That is insane.
You are pulling the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of homes worth of electricity, and you're funneling it entirely into mathematical matrix multiplications. And xAI deployed this infrastructure at a speed that literally broke historical records for data center construction.
Which is incredible, but it also brings up an obvious friction point. I mean, it's like moving into a fully furnished, state-of-the-art mansion just because the owner built an even bigger mega mansion next door.
That's a good way to put it.
But wait, Anthropic is already deeply embedded with the traditional hyperscalers, right? They have massive, multi-billion-dollar partnerships with Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud.
They do, yeah.
And AWS and Google are practically in the business of building 300-megawatt data centers. So if Anthropic needs to scale up, why go to their ideological rival for this? Why not just requisition more server racks from Amazon?
Well, going to a rival implies the standard pipeline is broken, but it isn't broken. It's just hopelessly backlogged.
Ah, I see.
Anthropic is staring down just an absolute avalanche of demand. Current metrics show them hitting up to 80x revenue growth.
80x. That's staggering.
Right. And when you scale a user base and an enterprise API business by a factor of 80, your compute demands don't just increase linearly, they compound.
They skyrocket.
Exactly. Amazon and Google are definitely building out dedicated infrastructure for Anthropic, but hyperscale data centers require permitting, massive grid interconnect studies, local substation upgrades.
All the boring physical stuff.
Exactly. And those AWS and Google deployments won't fully mature until late 2026 or into 2027.
Yeah, they just can't wait.
Anthropic cannot afford to wait 12 to 18 months. They need the compute capacity like this afternoon.
Right. They need to plug in right now.
Exactly. And on the other side of the equation, xAI built Colossus One so aggressively that they actually outpaced their own immediate utilization.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they migrated their primary development focus over to their next generation facility, Colossus 2.
Okay, so Colossus 1 was just sitting there.
It left Colossus 1 with high-end idle capacity. Plus, you have to remember that SpaceX and xAI are positioning themselves for a massive expected IPO. Ah, so there's a financial angle.
Always. Securing high-margin, long-term leasing revenue from a premium client like Anthropic really diversifies their balance sheet. It shows institutional investors that xAI isn't just a research lab.
They're an infrastructure provider.
Right. They are a top-tier infrastructure provider capable of monetizing their assets even when they aren't training their own models.
So it really is a ruthless marriage of convenience.
Supply simply met demand, and they sideline the philosophy.
Wow. But I want to drill down into why that demand is compounding so aggressively. Because we constantly hear about scaling laws in AI, right? Like from Epoch AI and the ARPSIF papers mentioned in our sources.
Right, the scaling laws.
It's this idea that pumping more data and more compute into a model inherently makes it better. I think a lot of people picture this as just making the computer faster, but it's actually more about resolution.
The resolution analogy is a really great way to frame it. Yeah, think of compute like the megapixels on a digital camera. The training algorithm is the lens. You can have a perfectly engineered lens, but if your sensor only has 2 megapixels, your photograph, your AI's worldview, is always going to be blurry.
It will hallucinate details.
Exactly, because it simply doesn't have the granular resolution to see the underlying logic of the data. By throwing 220,000 GPUs at the model, you're exponentially increasing the megapixels.
Which allows the AI to process a vastly wider, multidimensional matrix of language patterns. It finds much tighter, highly accurate correlations.
Right.
And that is exactly why compute has functionally become the new global reserve currency. It's black gold. The algorithms are largely understood across the industry now.
The secret sauce is out.
Pretty much. The bottleneck capping the intelligence of these models is no longer theoretical computer science. It is the physical constraint of securing the chips, piping in the electricity, and managing the thermodynamics.
And if you are an end user, this macroeconomic hardware maneuvering is about to have a very immediate, highly noticeable impact on your daily workflow.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you use Claude Pro, Max, Team, or Enterprise, within a matter of weeks, your usage limits for tools like Claude Code are going to double.
Because the physical bottleneck is being removed from the consumer layer?
Exactly. Think about how often you hit a rate limit when you're deep in a workflow. You know, those peak hour restrictions where the model suddenly refuses to process a massive document because network traffic is too high.
So frustrating.
Well, this deal removes that friction almost overnight. Those limits vanish. For developers building software on the back of Claude, the API rate limits are being vastly expanded.
It's a huge relief valve.
When Anthropic gets the keys to Memphis, the digital friction that you experience just drops out of the system. The sheer volume of available inference compute effectively eliminates the queue.
And it highlights a really critical dynamic in the current tech landscape. We often treat software and cloud services as these ethereal, infinite resources.
The magical cloud.
Right. But every time you hit a rate limit, you are bumping into the physical limitations of a server rack sitting in a warehouse somewhere.
A very hot server rack.
Exactly. Expanding access to an intelligence platform requires pouring concrete and running heavy-gauge copper wiring.
But, you know, pouring concrete hits a wall eventually. If a single facility in Memphis requires 300 megawatts, and the scaling laws dictate that the next generation of models will require 10 times that amount.
We are hurtling toward a physical ceiling.
We really are. Local power grids are already buckling under the strain of these deployments. Municipalities are pushing back against the water consumption required for the cooling towers.
You cannot indefinitely scale gigawatt data centers on terrestrial grids, not without severely disrupting the infrastructure of the cities around them.
Which forces the industry to look for real estate that isn't bound by terrestrial zoning laws or local power grids.
And this is the transition point.
Right. This moves us from the pragmatic Memphis deal to the deeply ambitious kind of sci-fi long-term vision outlined in their partnership.
The really wild stuff.
Anthropic and SpaceX explicitly intend to collaborate on developing multi-gigawatt AI compute capacity in orbit,
Multi-gigawatt. In orbit.
moving multiple cities' worth of power demand into space. It's essentially building the ultimate green off-grid server farm, except off-grid means literally off the planet.
It sounds like science fiction. But the physics of the environment actually solve the terrestrial bottlenecks you just mentioned.
So break down the why space explanation for us, because it seems crazy.
Well, the environmental logic of orbital compute is highly compelling. First, you completely eliminate the resource competition with human populations.
Right, you aren't draining a local reservoir for cooling water.
Or pulling electricity away from a hospital grid. Second, power generation in orbit is uniquely efficient. An orbital solar array isn't restricted by the day-night cycle, or atmospheric diffusion, or weather patterns.
It's just always sunny.
Exactly. You have access to intense, uninterrupted solar irradiance 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
But there is a massive misconception about the third component, which is thermal management.
Oh, the cooling.
Yeah. A lot of people hear space and assume the hardware will easily stay cool because space is cold. But space is a vacuum.
It acts like a giant thermos.
Exactly. Down here on Earth, data centers use convection. They blow cold air over the heat sinks to carry the thermal energy away. In a vacuum, there is no air to carry the heat.
And that is one of the most severe engineering challenges of orbital compute. You cannot use fans.
So what do you do?
The only way to shed heat in a vacuum is through thermal radiation, literally radiating the heat away as infrared light.
Wow.
To cool a multi-gigawatt cluster of GPUs, you would need to engineer and deploy immense, incredibly heavy external radiator panels.
So the thermodynamics of the system have to be completely redesigned from the silicon up.
They do.
Which brings us to why SpaceX is the only viable partner for this. Anthropic could never execute an orbital strategy with Amazon or Google.
No, no chance.
Building this infrastructure requires lifting thousands of tons of servers, solar arrays, shielding, and those massive radiators into low Earth orbit.
And SpaceX possesses a monopoly on the necessary mass-to-orbit economics.
They're the only ones with the rockets.
Right. The Starship platform fundamentally alters the cost calculus of putting heavy payload into space. You need an immense cadence launching heavy lift vehicles multiple times a week just to assemble the foundational structures.
That's a lot of launches.
Plus, operating a distributed network of orbital hardware requires deep expertise in space-based laser communications and automated station keeping.
Which SpaceX has from Starlink.
Exactly. They have spent the last several years mastering those exact disciplines through the deployment of the Starlink constellation.
They already know how to operate a mega constellation at scale. But let's bring this back down to Earth for a moment.
Let's do that.
Because placing the compute in orbit introduces intense friction points. And I want to push back on this a bit. Looking at the actual user experience, the most immediate hurdle is latency. Okay, space isn't exactly a friendly neighborhood for sensitive electronics, but also, if I ask Claude a question, does my prompt have to travel to space and back in real time?
It does, and the physics of signal propagation cannot be bypassed.
Right.
Even operating at the speed of light, transmitting a prompt from a smartphone up to a server in the low Earth orbit, and waiting for the calculation to beam back down introduces a physical delay. You are looking at a minimum of 20 to 50 milliseconds of round-trip latency.
And that's just for the transmission.
Right. That's before the GPUs even start processing the prompt.
Which I guess doesn't sound like much if you're just asking Claude to summarize a PDF.
Sure.
But AI is moving toward high-frequency, real-time applications. If you're running an algorithmic trading firm or using a real-time voice interface that needs to seamlessly interrupt a user.
Like we're doing right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Parsing human speech patterns natively.
Yeah.
50 milliseconds of injected lag completely degrades that experience.
It does. It means the software layer has to evolve to mask the hardware latency. Inference algorithms will likely need to be rewritten to handle highly asynchronous processing.
So my phone would do some of the work.
Yeah, the local device, your phone or laptop, might handle the immediate lightweight processing to keep the interface responsive. Meanwhile, the heavy, deep reasoning tasks are quietly offloaded to the orbital cluster in the background.
It forces a complete rethink of the network protocol stack.
Absolutely. Because standard TCP/IP routing was not designed to route trillions of parameters of neural network data through the exosphere.
Right. And the data isn't just dealing with latency. The hardware has to survive the
The
environment.
radiation is a huge problem.
Earth's atmosphere does an incredible job of protecting our electronics from cosmic radiation. When you put a cluster of high-end NVIDIA chips in orbit, they are exposed to high-energy particles. Unfiltered. If a cosmic ray passes through a GPU, it can cause a single event upset.
Literally flipping a 1 to a 0 in the memory bank.
Yes, a bit flip. In traditional computing, a bit flip might just cause a brief software glitch.
But in a neural network performing continuous trillion-parameter matrix calculations, a single corrupted value can cascade through the entire model.
It could completely destabilize the output.
Solving this requires severe mitigation strategies.
Well, you can use hardware shielding, right? Like wrapping the servers in lead or water jackets.
You could, but that adds catastrophic amounts of weight, which ruins the launch economics we just talked about.
Ah, right. It gets too heavy to launch.
So the solution relies heavily on software redundancy. You don't just run the calculation once. The cluster runs the exact same inference path simultaneously across 3 separate GPU arrays.
Okay, so they double-check each other.
Exactly. If 2 arrays return the same result and the third returns an anomaly because of a radiation strike, the system votes out the corrupted data.
But wait, requiring 3 times the compute to verify a single output drastically undercuts the efficiency gains of putting the system in space to begin with.
It absolutely does. And then there is the sheer logistical nightmare of maintenance. Down in Memphis, if a server blade burns out, a technician walks down the aisle, pulls the rack, and swaps the hardware in 10 minutes.
In orbit, there are no technicians.
None. The hardware degradation curve in space is unforgiving. Every component must be hyper-redundant. The system design has to assume a continuous, acceptable rate of hardware failure.
So they just let them break.
They will likely need to employ automated robotics to physically swap out degraded server nodes, or they might simply build the constellation with so much excess capacity that they can afford to let thousands of GPUs permanently die without impacting the overall performance.
That sounds wildly expensive. So the engineering hurdles are massive. But according to the reports we're looking at, the geopolitics of this might be even more complex.
Oh, the geopolitics are a minefield.
We're talking about advanced AI infrastructure. The U.S. government currently trains these high-end chips with the same regulatory scrutiny as weapons-grade technology.
They enforce strict export controls to prevent rival nations from accessing the compute necessary to design cyber weapons or novel biological agents.
Which creates a fascinating jurisdictional paradox. When you place a multi-gigawatt cluster of the most powerful dual-use technology ever created into international space, whose jurisdiction does it actually fall under?
Well, the Outer Space Treaty prohibits claims of national sovereignty in orbit.
So it's technically international waters up there.
Pretty much.
If the servers are physically detached from U.S. soil, does the U.S. military still defend them?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. If a rival nation decides to launch an anti-satellite weapon or use directed energy to blind the orbital cluster, is that an act of war against the United States? Or simply corporate sabotage against SpaceX and Anthropic?
The regulatory framework for orbital computing simply does not exist yet. The intelligence agencies and defense departments are going to heavily scrutinize how Anthropic and SpaceX secure the uplink and downlink telemetry.
Because if that data stream is intercepted,
the strategic damage would be catastrophic.
Unbelievable. There is also an environmental paradox embedded in this vision that we need to touch on.
Yeah, the green energy aspect.
Right. We established earlier that utilizing orbital solar power bypasses the strain on terrestrial grids, making it technically a green operation once it's deployed.
It is deployed, yes.
But getting the infrastructure up there requires an immense amount of kinetic energy.
The initial carbon footprint is just staggering. To lift gigawatts worth of servers and radiators into orbit, SpaceX will have to launch thousands of heavy rockets.
Thousands.
You are bringing millions or tons of methane and liquid oxygen in the atmosphere just to build a solar-powered array in space.
So it is a massive environmental investment.
It might take decades of clean orbital operation to actually pay off the initial atmospheric deficit.
That's a huge trade-off. And finally, we have to look at the cultural friction of these two organizations trying to execute this.
The culture clash.
Yeah. Can Anthropic's strict safety-first alignment survive SpaceX's move fast and break things ethos? Anthropic stresses every possible failure mode before releasing anything.
And SpaceX's entire operational ethos is iterative engineering. They deliberately push rockets until they explode on the launch pad.
because the data gathered from the failure accelerates the overall timeline.
Exactly. So reconciling those two cultures over a multi-decade orbital project is going to be the ultimate stress test of corporate alignment.
You have a software company that treats failure as an existential threat to humanity, partnering with an aerospace company that treats failure as a necessary stepping stone for progress.
It's a fascinating dynamic.
Furthermore, if they succeed, they could fundamentally corner the market on the future of intelligence. Is it healthy for the AI industry to depend so heavily on a single provider for space hyperscaling?
If the physics of scaling laws dictate that the most powerful AI models must eventually move to orbit, and SpaceX holds the only economically viable transport system to get there, we risk creating an unprecedented monopoly.
Anthropic gets exclusive access to the only environment capable of sustaining next-generation compute.
And SpaceX becomes the sole gatekeeper to the infrastructure of human knowledge.
Wow. So let's look at the big takeaway here, summarizing this massive paradigm shift.
The sheer, inescapable mathematics of compute demand are acting as an unstoppable gravitational force.
This alliance proves that the sheer need for computing power and the drive for a multiplanetary future will force even the fiercest ideological rivals to join forces.
Compute is no longer just a technical requirement on a spreadsheet.
Compute has become a strategic commodity that overrides everything else. It overrides past insults, differing safety philosophies, and eventually the physical boundaries of the Earth.
Absolutely.
So connecting this back to you, the listener, whether you are just trying to get your Claude prompts answered faster this week with those newly doubled limits, or you're watching the dawn of space-based hyperscalers, this single deal reshapes your technological future.
The bottleneck has been recognized, the terrestrial limits are being mapped, and the solutions are pointing straight up. The architecture required to push artificial intelligence to its logical conclusion is actively preparing to leave the planet.
It really is. And it leaves us with one incredibly provocative final thought for you to mull over.
Building directly on that geopolitical minefield we just explored.
Exactly. If the most advanced, powerful AI models eventually live in orbit, physically detached from any single nation's soil, who really governs them?
Is it the careful, safety-first engineers back on Earth who wrote the constitutional code?
Or, when push comes to shove, is the true authority held by the company that controls the only rockets capable of reaching the off switch?
It's definitely something to think about.
Think about that next time you look up at the stars. Thanks for listening.